Joab was told, "The king is weeping and mourning for Absalom." And for the whole army, the victory that day was turned into mourning, because on that day the troops heard it said, "The king is grieving for his son." Listen to this description. "The men stole into the city that day, as men steal in who are ashamed when they flee from battle." Isn't that such an evocative description that you imagine someone who's fled from the front line and they kind of sneak back into their home and they're full of shame and they're unsettled and disgruntled? All the men in the army are having those kinds of feelings, even though they've won the battle that they needed to win in order to restore the rightful king. These mixed messages are coming from David, and it's not good for the people. Joab, the commander of the army, speaks to David. And these words are wise, and these words are helpful, and these words are truthful. But you better believe these words are painful. The question is, how would you have responded to this wise counsel? Joab went into the house to the king and said, "Today you have humiliated all your men, who have just saved your life and the lives of your sons and daughters and the lives of your wives and concubines. You love those who hate you and hate those who love you. You have made it clear today that the commanders and their men mean nothing to you. I see that you would be pleased if Absalom were alive today and all of us were dead. Now, go out and encourage your men. I swear by the Lord that if you don't go out, not a man will be left with you by nightfall. This will be worse for you than all the calamities that have come upon you from your youth until now." And David, we read, who must have had to drag himself to get there in front of them, he got up and he took his seat in the gateway. Do you remember how, not all that long ago, Absalom himself was sat in the gateway, in the place of command and control, visible publicly and working diligently for the good of the people? It presents an image here of competence and love that the people need to see. And so David perhaps has to drag himself to get there, but indeed he goes. And he sits, and some measure of calm is restored to the troops of David. As David now comes back into the capital and is returned to the throne, there is a moment of reckoning for those who have turned against him. And there are some surprises on what you might call this day of judgment. Amasa, who was the leader of the enemy army, he is forgiven and he is honored. He receives amazing grace. Joab, who of course was the one to kill Absalom, is demoted, and Amasa, Absalom's own general, is promoted. And we are reminded, I think, in this, that we are those who have sinned against God, who have not lived the lives that we should, and yet his amazing grace is extended towards us. And we are told that not only while we were still sinners, Christ died for us, while we were his enemies, his grace was extended to us. We are told even that we will rule and reign with Jesus in heaven. Amasa is a picture of that. And then we catch up with Shimei, the son of Gera. Remember, he was the one who was throwing down rocks upon David. And now he finds out that David has been returned to his authority. And so he falls down before the king and he says, verse 19, "May my lord not hold me guilty. Do not remember how your servant did wrong on the day my lord the king left Jerusalem. May the king put it out of his mind, for I, your servant, know that I have sinned. But today I have come here as the first from the tribes of Joseph, to come down and meet my lord the king." This scene points to Christ in the fact that Jesus does what David cannot. David does extend forgiveness here, but he takes it back later. The king said to Shimei, "You shall not die," and the king promised him on oath. Now this looks beautiful in the moment, but just so you know, on his deathbed, David will speak to his son and order the death of this man, Shimei. This forgiveness was temporary, but ours is eternal, and we ought to be so grateful for that. And the third restoration, Mephibosheth, remember him? Last David had heard of it, his servant Ziba shared the news that Mephibosheth has turned against you. He's gone to the capital to see if perhaps the kingdom might be given to him as a descendant of King Saul. And that, of course, upset David greatly, and David gave all of Mephibosheth's possessions to his servant Ziba. Well, now Mephibosheth comes and presents himself before David, and the truth comes out. David, who was only working with human wisdom, simply says this: "Well, it sounds like your word against his word. I took your property and gave it to him. Now here's my command. You divide it all in half. Take half from him." Mephibosheth says, verse 30, "Let him take everything, now that my lord the king has returned safely." Now that is a beautiful response. I don't care about these resources. I care about relationship with the king. I don't care about these possessions. I care about being in the presence of the king. That reveals his heart, doesn't it? Now, the fact is that when you get to heaven, there will be an abundance of resources. There will be literal treasures, items of great value. But the thing that makes heaven heaven is that is where the king resides. And the thing that should thrill your heart as you look forward to it is not the possessions you will acquire, but the relationship you will enjoy when the king has come home and you are with him at last.